Hello and welcome this evening. My name is Beth Herrick and I am the program specialist with Morrisson-Reeves Library. I'm so happy to be here with you all tonight for this program called Celebrating Our Journey. It's a Black History Month panel, and we'll talk with the panelists in just a moment. But I'd like to first thank the Friends of Morrisson-Reeves Library for providing the funding and resources to make this and all of our programs possible. I'm very excited about this event. I believe that we should be celebrating our personal and our cultural and our nation's history all year round. We focus on Black history a bit more in this month, and that is the occasion that I wanted to bring these particular community leaders together for this conversation. I will say that Ahmed Kanini is not available this evening. He had a little tickle in his throat, and so he won't be joining. I'll be stepping in as moderator, and he sends his regrets. Ahmed is the director of the Center for Social Justice at Earlham College, and Ahmed's initiated a partnership with Morrisson-Reeves Library to bring more of their programming focused on a social justice perspective of moving our community forward in many ways. Not only on the Earlham campus, but bringing that to the Richmond community and the larger Wayne County community as well. So I'm very grateful to be partnering with Ahmed. You may have noticed when you entered, there are some books and resources here. We've got little Martin Luther King family discussion kits that we had for Martin Luther King Day there for you to pick up as well. If you'd like to check out any of those books this evening, you can. On the reverse side of your list of all the panelists in the event for this evening, you'll find a few other events of interest. I'll let you take a look at those on your own time. If you want more information on any of them, please let me know. I'm happy to talk as long as you'd like to listen about them. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to the panelists. We have Ms. SHeila Armstead, who is a retired professor of social work at IU East. She also has been very active with the Townsend Center community, and she serves on Townsend Center Incorporated board, and she serves as a CASA advocate. So we're happy to have Ms. SHeila here. Bob Hunter, who has worn many hats, one of which for a long time Richmondites, you know that he was the chair of the Human Rights Commission locally for the city of Richmond. Bob also is retired from the interfaith group, and we're just happy to have his leadership here in our community and him here tonight. Carl is doing very exciting things in the community with his consulting firm and with a mentoring program called Future Achievers. So we're very excited to have Carl Rhinehart III here. And then Tommy as well is here this evening. Tommy's been involved in many community efforts. He is a longtime NAACP volunteer leader, serving as president for over a decade. So we're very lucky to have him in this community leading in that way. And a proud IU graduate and member of Mount Moriah.
Oh, Mount Olive.
Mount Olive. Oh my gosh, did I just say that? Can you edit that out maybe? Proud member of Mount Olive. I should have brought it up. So I'll let the panelists announce anything they'd like to say about why they're here. If they'd like to mention why they're here tonight, why this panel is, why they agreed to say yes to me besides that I'm so charming.
Well, I'd like to mention when Beth approached me about the opportunity, I was interested, but then when I found out who my fellow panelists would be, I've had the opportunity to work on committees with the members of this group and appreciate their efforts and continued support of not only the Richmond community, but in particular the community of color.
Yeah. Well, I'm here, happy to be here first of all, honored to be a part of this conversation and to be up here with these panelists especially. Known many of these individuals for a number of years, my time here in Richmond, and again, just in all to sit alongside of them. I'm here for conversation. I'm here to learn as much as I am here to share with you all and with this panel. But I truly believe in order for us to make any progress or to get to where we hope to get to, it's going to take conversation. It's going to take dialogue between folks that don't look like each other, that don't think the same way, to sit down, have conversation, get to know one another, and better understand each other's experiences.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm retired, and a retired teacher doesn't have anybody to teach, so I'm here in part to participate in the educational experience, and I think that's really important.
I'm here because Beth said I had to come, but that's a whole different ballgame. But I want to echo what Carl was talking about. Regardless of whether we celebrate Black History Month or Indigenous Month or Latinx Month, we need to be able to sit down and really talk to each other and be honest. We don't know who each other are. We choose not to for fear of finding out that they're more like you. So I'm here for honest conversation. If your toes are kind of stepped on, that's for a reason. Think about why you feel the way you do. The fear is of the unknown, and we cannot get together and be one community until we sit down and talk and be honest and let our feelings out and understand the truth of this country, because our children, and myself included, learned a lot of history. But it's amazing, I'm almost 73 years old, and I'm learning more about this country than what I was told in school. So I think it's time that we start opening up the doors and start being honest with each other about the history of this country and how we got to this point, because we're not going to be able to change until we do start that conversation.
I want to start with a broad opening question. As we celebrate Black History Month, are there any role models or ways that you personally or might recommend to us celebrate Black history and Black achievement?
I'll start with that. I'd like to go to some of the unsung heroes. Many of us know the stories of Martin Luther King, but we do not know the stories of other people, many of the leaders of the movement, and many of those who work behind the scenes. And I think since many of us are people behind the scenes, we need to celebrate people who are like us. So I think that's a good place to start Black History Month, is to look at those people who helped in the civil rights movement or in other movements along the way who are behind the scenes. How many of you know the name Joanne Robinson? Anybody know Joanne Robinson? Okay, a few hands know Joanne Robinson. Joanne Robinson was a person who helped Martin Luther King get the word out before the bus boycott in Montgomery. She had what was it called, a ditto machine? And she got the flyers out. She called her group of women together, and they distributed the flyers to get the word out about the buses being boycotted in Montgomery in 1956. Is that right? Right here, 56. So, an unsung hero, somebody who's that mimeograph machine, that's what it was called, a mimeograph machine, and she was out working that mimeograph machine. So that's something that maybe we consider ourselves insignificant because that's what we do. The Xerox machine or the computer behind the scenes. But she was very, very important in that movement and really encouraged the leadership of that movement. They couldn't have done it without her. And so I think that it's important as we celebrate Black History Month to remember not just those who were the leaders, but people who were behind the scenes, helping out and encouraging the leadership, being the stalwarts behind it. And if that's your job, if that's your calling in life, then that's a very important calling, to be one of those people. So I would start with her. Ella Baker is another name that comes up in that. Miles Horton. You know Miles Horton? Miles Horton. He ran a school, a labor union school, and he was the person that trained Rosa Parks. in activism, and so helped her get out there. Not only that, but he has another connection to another movement, because when Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German minister who fought Hitler, when he came to this country, he encountered Miles Horton and was taken through the countryside of Miles Horton. He was educated by Miles Horton as well. So those unsung heroes that are running this program or that program, that maybe didn't make it to the big time screen, but are still very important in the movement. So that's where I would start, with that celebration.
I'm going to look at it from a local level. First of all, my father, who grew up and was raised in Tuskegee, Alabama, his older brothers were part of the Tuskegee experiment. And just to hear that from his mouth, and knowing my uncles and what they went through. Bobby Smith, Robert Bobby Smith, who used to fire the neighborhood up about becoming a member of the local chapter of the NAACP. I can remember as a child going up to the Nicholson schoolyard, and Bobby standing on the back of a pickup with a megaphone, just raising hell about getting involved with the movement. Reverend R.E. Girton was a longtime minister in the community with Mount Moriah Baptist Church, and a strong leader in the local chapter of the NAACP. Charlie Nelms, former chancellor of IUEs, when I was working with Reed Hospital in the Human Resource Department, I was basically hired with an emphasis on minority and diversity recruitment. A tough job in a predominantly white organization, but I was fortunate to have leadership that supported that goal. But at one of our board meetings, in giving our annual report on recruitment, Charlie Nelms brought up a point. He said, yeah, if you're wanting to hire more black nurses or black technicians, skill level, or what we call scared skill level positions, you got to build that product. And you need to start like at middle school in order to develop the interest, get those kids involved with the academics, and then offer them post-high school learning opportunities. And then the organizations that hire them need to be willing to bring them on board. And that's, all those individuals influenced my involvement at the local level, and still trying to get that group and the local school system engaged in getting these young people involved. I look up to Carl Rhinehart because he offers me an intergenerational view of how to get young people involved in the movement. We're probably about maybe 15 years age and different, but I learned a lot from this brother just on making that effort more productive.
I'm going to go more to a specific contemporary policy issue. We've got several contemporary institutional issues that we're facing that have to do with teaching history and also looking into the future of where our nation's moving and where our state's moving. At the state level, House Bill 1134 has attracted much attention. One of the provisions is to ban the teaching of critical race theory or anything that may make students feel uncomfortable. NAACP, Indiana State Teachers Association, and the Candles Holocaust Museum in Terre Haute are a few of the organizations standing against this bill to ensure that teachers can honestly and accurately educate students about history and other subjects without fear of reprisal. Proponents of this provision of the bill claim it will protect students from harm, but some opponents of this provision claim that students of color are made both to learn about race and to feel the uncomfortable effects of racism at a very young age, So this bill would serve to shelter white students from learning about race and grow a wider gap between understanding across students. Panelists, I ask you, what would you want lawmakers who support this bill to know and or talk about how we currently and how we should teach history? I know we've touched on that a little bit, but expound there.
As a former diversity professor at IU East, one of the things that I always stress to the students in learning about diversity, it is not about the color of your skin. It is about understanding your ancestry. Where did you come from? What did your parents say? What did your grandparents say? And I always use the phrase, what do you know versus what were you told? And that is to start the students to start thinking about the things that I was told about African Americans, the things that I was told about whites, the things that I was told about the Latinx population, etc. Were they true? And if you open up your heart, your mind, and listen to what someone else has to say, and walk in their shoes, you will learn that a lot of things that you were taught by your parents, your grandparents, etc., and your community were untrue. Not all of it was untrue, but they were untrue. You have to know who you are as an individual and come up with your own beliefs and values. If you don't do that, then you become another puppet of society that continues the hate, that continues the uneducated ideas about different populations. We can even go further. It doesn't have to be about race. It is about people with abilities. It is about people that are of my age, your elders. Where is the respect? We have no respect. Our young people do not really have respect for others, nor do they have respect for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're teaching about diversity, and I really don't like that term, but that's what we always use, we need to look at who each person is and respect them, whether we agree or not. But let's agree to disagree, but still have that respect.
For me, this is, appreciate this question because it's definitely something I've thought about, from hearing House Bill 1134 and kind of seeing some of the response. I don't really know, I think, where I land, or honestly, I think maybe I do. I'm more focused on values. It is more of where my interest lies, is more of where my heart is. Because to echo what Ms. SHeila said, I can recall some of the things that I was taught, as a child, from my father, from my grandfather, and others. I know what I've been taught from my environment and from what I've experienced. Now as an adult, as a grown man, though, I'm challenged with putting those things into perspective and to figuring out for myself, what is really true, that difference between what I was told and what I know. So with this particular question, there's some things, and I know definitely what I feel and what I believe, from watching the news over the last several years and seeing how the media helps to, push agendas and push narratives and how things are discussed and how buzzwords are used to incite one group or another. Quite plainly, too, I struggle with a lot of terms that I've grown up with and become accustomed to using, because part of me feels that it's divisive at heart. That by putting certain folks in a box and slapping a label on them, although it's good to classify and helps us to classify and understand, on the flip side of that, it's also used to divide. We can say male versus female, black versus white, and any other, versus the other. So almost inherently, it's set up to divide. So I say that to say the idea of critical race theory. We talk about that. You're going to have some people that are going to stand up and cheer critical race theory, absolutely. You're going to have others that just based on the name are going to bash it and going to say absolutely not. We don't need this in our schools. We don't need this hurting our kids, so on and so forth. So for me, it's let's put the term aside. To me, I don't have to label it. I don't have to label it to understand it. What I want for myself, what I want for the children that I serve, what I want for my children coming up is the truth. That's what I want to hear. That's what I want to see. That's what I know. That's what I've lacked in a great deal of my life is the truth. And I've been on a very long journey to discover what that is and to figure that out for myself. When we talk about this and, to talk about the truth, and if somebody wanted to argue and say, well, what is that? Or you can kind of, this truth versus that truth, I think that then goes to the heart of the person. What are your motives behind telling this story versus that story? Sat in classes as I'm in high schools and I'm in schools working with students, and I'm interested in hearing the things that teachers are teaching and the conversations that are happening. I was in a class at one point, and I remember them talking about, kind of the 1500s and 1600s and kind of what was happening over in Europe and what was happening in the Americas at that time. And I'm sitting there and I'm wondering, and I'm listening to the kind of the presentation and how it's being presented and how I'm ingesting it and how I'm feeling about it. And I'm looking around the room at the students' faces and I'm wondering how they're ingesting this as well too. And so when you talk 1600s especially, you get there and you talk about the Americas. If you're talking about, in Europe and Spain, how they sent the explorers over to then, search out, goods and they found precious metals and spices and they opened up trade routes and things like that. That sounds pretty good. But I'm sitting there wondering, there was some other folks here too that didn't look like them Spanish or look like them English folks. Where are they at in this story? And what were they doing and what was happening to them? Not only the black folks or the enslaved, the Africans that came over and from those regions, but the indigenous people who were already in America or on this land, at that particular time. What was happening to them and what was the why behind? So you open up trade routes. Again, as a kid, I'm thinking, okay, that sounds all right. I mean, that sounds pretty legitimate. Like, okay, you need to, bring goods from one area to the next. You're opening up the economy. But at the same time, when you finally realize that there's folks that were coming over in them ships in chains, there were folks already on that land that were being slaughtered, and assumptions were being made, false stories were being made about those folks to make it easier for the colonizers to come over here and take what was theirs. Originally you start to understand things a little bit deeper. When you understand the economics behind the story too, it's like, wait a minute, okay, so you're coming over here to then harvest these goods and to raise these funds to then send back where? It brings up a whole nother conversation, and it helps me at least, to understand things a little bit deeper. And then for me as well too, I can put that in perspective and then fast forward to today's times. And then I can look at some of the things that are happening in this country and around this world, right now, and equate them to very similar things that were happening back then, because quite possibly the motives, could very well be the same. The injustice that we do is, if we're not equipping our young people with this truth, with the truth, how are we truly educating them? And if these young people are going to take over, if they're going to be the future leaders, if they're going to take care of us as we age and get older, if they're going to be the ones making decisions as to what happens to our care and our livelihoods, so on and so forth, shouldn't we equip them with truth so that they can make positive, good, informed decisions moving forward. If we only tell them a certain narrative for personal gain because it makes me feel good or because I don't want this or I don't want that, we really run the risk of setting ourselves up for harm in the future.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick up there. What I would like the legislators to know is history. I'd like them to know some history. And a lot of history they do not know. I'm getting a little hoarse here. Yeah, a lot of the history they do not know. They don't know particularly history of people of color in this, persons of color. They don't know Chinese history. We need to understand what happened to the Chinese in this country. And so I would like them to know history before they critique the teaching of history. And when you have legislators who do not know the history, then they cannot help make laws that are fair in the teaching of history. Now, I did teach critical race theory. It is not taught in our high schools. It is not taught in grade schools. It is an academic discipline that is taught at the college and the grad school level. I taught it because I taught a course on racism, and critical race theory was one of the many things we looked at when we were teaching it. And critical race theory is very interesting because it is a legal theory, and it has to do with systemic injustice. In other words, it takes two things. It says personal racism is one thing, systemic injustice is yet another thing. An example of systemic injustice is the redlining. There was a time when the banks would set aside draw red lines around a black neighborhood and say, we're not loaning to anybody for houses in that neighborhood. So when you see that, when that happened, then none of the people in the black neighborhood could get loans, and that greatly reduced the size and the background, how much money that those communities could gather. That is an example of systemic racism, and that is still affecting us today. So it's not something sinister. It's not sinister at all. It's just saying sometimes racism is not personal. It gets itself into the system. And so when we see redlining of banks, when that happened, that meant black people could not get the kind of loans that white people could get. They could not build the kind of equity in their background that whites could get, and black families are suffering from that now. So that's all that's about. It's not anything mysterious, it's not racist. It's just simply saying sometimes racism occurs at a systemic level and not a personal level. Not everything is personal hatred. Not everything is discrimination. Sometimes discrimination occurs in a system, even with well-meaning people. And if we don't understand that, we don't fix some of the things that are happening now. To stop that from being taught in anywhere along the line appropriate to the age group is to stop a very important discussion about racism. And it's to stop it. And I don't understand why critical race theory was picked up in that way. It's simply saying systems get stuff in them that do you in. And if they get that stuff in them, then it continues on, even past when it's gone. And so you find neighborhoods of black people like Harlem that are greatly impoverished. Why did that happen? Why is it still going on? Because the equity of those families in those neighborhoods was not built up because of that kind of system that happened. And so it's that kind of discussion that's very, very important. It should not be truncated. It should not be blocked out of education. And to do so is really, it's damaging. But I think it's more than that. I think critical race theory is really a fear of teaching anything true about black history. Because black history is very, very, very troublesome and glorious.
Yeah.
Black families did wonderful things. Right after slavery, you had brilliant orators go into Congress. But they didn't get taught that way. When I was in junior high, I remember being taught that those orators were stupid. Well, I read some of their speeches later in life, and I said, ooh, they had oratory better than Martin Luther King, coming right out of slavery. Brilliant people. Brilliant people. Our students need to know that. Black students in particular need to know that. That we weren't always on the bottom. But the problem is, if you teach that, then you have to ask what happened to those people. And right after that, what happened, that those people were thrown out, the laws were changed so that black people couldn't vote. In 1870, 1875, there were civil rights laws passed. 1870, 1875. What happened to those laws? A conservative Supreme Court struck down those laws, and we were thrown into Jim Crow era, where it was open season on black people, and lynchings happened. And I can describe a lynching that would send all you out of here with your, ready to throw up, because they were horrible things. Families moved their entire families would go to these lynchings. White families, white communities, they would take their children and their lunches, and they would sit there and eat those things. Those are some terrible things. We don't want to tell all of that to all age groups. We can't tell that all. But that's what happened, and if you know history, you don't want to shut that down. You want to talk about it, because we got to work that out. That's still in the trauma. That's still in our bones. The reason we feel such tightness about racism is because that's in our bones. That's in our guts. We know somehow something's terribly wrong, and something terribly wrong in this country. There were items where it was like ISIS. Some of these communities acted just like ISIS in terms of black bodies and black humanity. And so we've got to be honest with those things. And this happened not just during slavery. Some of this happened during my lifetime. I'm 75. I will turn 75 in April. It happened during my lifetime. It's not that long ago. And so we've got to have those kind of discussions. Now, they've got to be appropriate to the age group. You can't teach all of this to children in school, but we've got to deal with those things because it's gut level.
I think that's where understanding yourself and trying to teach others and having conversations that's how we get to start that path of teaching, is understanding who we are before we start talking to someone else and teaching them about the real history of this country. There is so much going on that we, like Bob was saying, we really don't know the true meaning of it, the foundation. But he's lived through it, I've lived through it, and I'm still living through it because I can see each and every day what is going on here in Richmond, which everybody denies. But it's happening, and it is systemic. It cannot change until we start to change and look at the truth and accept that truth. A lot of our government was founded on these people that Bob was referring to earlier before the Spanish came over. The indigenous people had the foundation of our government that we utilize today, but you're not being taught that. Children are not being taught that. We would not be here economically if it had not been for the indigenous people, for the slaves. They are the ones who started the trend. They're the ones who invented lots of things that you use today and can't get away from. They invented them, but because of the fact, the color of their skin, they were not given that right to patent or to be acknowledged that they are the inventors. If it hadn't been for those people, we would not be where we are today. And we need to be able to acknowledge that and teach our children that you have a long history of people, a long history that you should be proud of, just as a human being. This bill, 1134, brings up a lot of fear in a lot of people, which will take away power. Power is the ultimate word. When you take away my power, what do I have? We need to keep working on this.
Yep, the legislature should represent the constituencies that they serve. And the state of Indiana, there are communities that used to be predominantly white, and now there is an influx of all different types of background. And one thing about a legislator, they should be able to hear. And what Bob mentioned, they should be able to understand, have some sense of history, to know what has affected the individuals within the groups that they serve. I just recently sat in on a town hall with a local legislator talking about House Bill 1134. Conversation went well until he indicated that he did not think that racism was systemic. And you could hear this gasp in the virtual room. And, I'm thinking, if this guy doesn't believe that, would he be willing to listen to anything I had to say as a person of color? And the first thing I'm thinking is it's time to get him out. We need to get someone in there regardless of the hue of their skin, but someone that's truly going to represent the constituency that they're elected to serve. We've got a lot of things going on in this country. We have a more informed voting group of color, and with that, we're starting to see the ugly heads of our past. The civil rights bill has been under attack. The voting rights bill is currently under attack. Restructuring voting districts, rules and regulations restricting everybody getting to the polls. So, House Bill 1134 is just one of many concerns at the legislative level. I look at just a couple of years ago, the state legislators had a debacle. They booed their fellow black legislators off the floor. And I'm thinking if House Bill 1134 is an issue, I can see why it is. Who's listening to who? And how are we forming the bills that govern this state and this country?
Thank you. I have many more questions I could ask, but we've got an eager audience here, and I wondered if there's a person with a question ready from the floor now. If not, I'll continue on, and we'll see if there's one in a second. Anyone in the audience have a question for our panelists?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
How, for our future, for teenagers like me, what do you guys give to advice, especially for young black men, on how to get jobs and to have people of color up on the boards of administration at colleges, hospitals, schools? What is your guys' advice to us?
Thank you so much. I'm going to restate that just so that this picks it up. This young gentleman asked, what is the panelist's advice to the younger generation, particularly young black men, in terms of having successful futures, I'm paraphrasing, and getting black folk in positions of institutional, economic, financial, societal leadership. Is that a fair rephrasing? Thank you, sir.
First thing that I would say is know who you are and be true to yourself. Get your education. It's not going to be easy because you're going to have barriers thrown at you continuously. Don't buckle under. Keep advocating for yourself. You have a right, and you fight for that right. When you go for a job, be proud of who you are. Don't slump, don't bow down to any question. Answer it. If you don't understand something, ask them to explain it and then answer it. Okay? To maintain your job, I had to learn how to stop using cold talking. That's when I'm at one place, I talk one way. When I'm at another place, I talk another way. Stand your ground. You're going to get flack from it. is stand your ground. Education is very, very important, but understand the foundation that you're learning, that's a foundation. Learn from it, draw from it, and grow. And you should be successful only if you stand for yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to emphasize that and draw from it. There is a term called internalized racism. That's a psychological term, but it's used, what it means is that black people in this country internalize the negativity around them, you know, and we can do that in very subtle ways. So we can feel bad about ourselves, you know, and now you've got a mentor who feels pretty good about himself, and so he's going to help you do that. But we need to fight that within ourselves. And you can get to a test and feel that. The psychologists have actually done that. They've set people up and had them take a test. And if they're taking this test and they're told it's about intelligence, even if it's a math test, they're told it's about intelligence, and then they say something about race, black people will do worse on the test in general than they will if those things are not mentioned. In other words, there's something that triggers in us that makes us worse at the task because we've dealt with so much in our heads about race and about our own abilities and that kind of thing. And so we dumb down even people that are very good at math and could do well on that math test. Suddenly when you introduce intelligence and race, they've heard so much negativity. And so we have to work that out in our lives and realize we face that. And so that's a thing that's there, and it's the back effect of racism on ourselves and our own psyche, and so we have to fight that. And the things that SHeila just mentioned are very important in fighting it, which is to, you know, stick to your guns, be proud of yourself, learn to respect yourself and your community, learn to love yourself. You know, self-love is very important. It sounds weird sometimes, but it is very important. And love our brothers and sisters, black brothers and sisters, and then everyone. That from our own self-love flows love for other people. You know, we don't love other people first, we love ourselves. And then when we love ourselves, we can love other people. And that's related also to our faith and the kinds of stuff that we understand about God loving us and our being made in God's image, and those kinds of things are very important.
And I applaud you for being here.
Yes.
The initiative that you show will incite your peer group. So, you know, just keep it up. And as mentioned, be true to yourself. The only thing that you should be mindful of is that all eyes will be on you. Don't let it frighten you. Let it energize you. You know, I hope to be able to include your peer group as part of the local chapter, because there is a definite need for the intergenerational exposure. Your age group, the group before you, my age group, the group above me, there is so much that we can share about we as a people, about the obstacles that you may come across, because we've been there. And don't be afraid to ask the questions that you don't understand. Like I said, I applaud you for being here.
Thank you.
I'd like to respond to that as well too. You know, thought that comes to mind is we have to prepare you, and by we, you know, me, all of us here, the community, you know, has to prepare. I don't care what color they are. The community has to prepare our youth, especially our young black youth, for the opportunities ahead. But then you have to also prepare yourself, all right? And so for me, it's about, you know, putting all of this together. And I concur with all of my colleagues here, absolutely, you know, as to what they said. The internalized racism is something I think that truly hits home. Again, you know, the stories of, I'm thinking back, a lot of stories that I remember coming up were about a black person having to rise up from the bottom, us having to be resilient, having to overcome, having to work twice as hard. having to be ready to face the injustices and the disrespect that we're going to get and overcome that. And I'll tell you, for me, man, that's exhausting. To think about, my gosh, I got to work twice as hard as everybody else. Like, why am I not, good enough? And I think for myself as well, too, it's easy for me to want to give up then. It's easy for me to say, you know what, I don't even want that then. And then now I live in a world that provides me a vision, a picture of other opportunities. I'll put that in air quotes because it's in the media. It's on television. It's on these social media apps. They show me the folks that are driving the big flashy cars that I've never seen before, wearing the jewels and having the money and the women and all these things, that I could easily shift my mind and say, this is what I aspire to have. And because I don't have that foundation, because it was presented to me in such a way, it's easy for me to go look at this other angle and say, I'm gonna go try to get it that way. Or it's easy for me just to give up, altogether and just say later for it, I'll just take whatever comes. So we have to definitely do a better job of preparing our youth to be able to take on these positions, when they come about. And it goes back to telling the truth. It goes back to telling our true history and educating our students and empowering them to feel good about themselves. The story I should have got was how I was a king at one point in time. People that looked like me wore crowns, and come from a land that is plentiful. Every natural resource, anything you want to find from water to metal, came from the earth, came from a continent that people that looked like me were plentiful on. It starts there. It starts instead of using slang terms to refer to each other. And I think about this because I was caught up in it when I was young too. I mean, and then, how we flip a negative word and say we're using it for a positive. And if you don't know what I'm talking about the N-word, right? And how we justify using that. But it's like I'm quick to call another black man the N-word, but I'm reluctant to call that black man a prince or a king. And that's some of what you will see in black culture nowadays, is that we're using these more empowering terms to talk to one another. We're speaking life to one another, and that's exactly what we have to do. What I should have been told back then, what I understand now, is that God's word tells me I've got everything I need already inside of me, right? Beautifully and wonderfully made. It's already there. I just have to tap into it. And that's the message that I share with young people. And then they've got to be prepared. They've got to prepare themselves. They've got to want to listen and learn, from others. They have to want to live their life in a certain way by these values and these morals as well, to align themselves properly to be able to realize the success. We as adults in the community too, not only do we have to provide our youth with information, we have to provide them with opportunities as well too. One of the things that are systematic, and this affects not only kids of color, but honestly it affects kids in poverty. It affects kids that just don't have access for whatever reason, right? And it's that all our kids don't get the same opportunities that other kids have. And when we deprive our kids of opportunities, we deprive them of education, we deprive them of hope, we deprive them of that opportunity to realize success. So we have to give them the information that they need. We have to also provide them with opportunities. We have to create platforms, opportunities for them to speak up, just like this young man did here today. And then we got to get out of the way and let them do what they need to do.
You're getting lots of hearts and all kinds of celebration on the Zoom. We got a dozen people over here shouting that up. So I love that this conversation is bring a lot of things together. Bob was talking about stereotype threat earlier, how invoking stereotypes actually makes minority folks, whether it's racial minorities or gender, whatever, do worse on things as simple as math tests. And then we've got Carl here doing his own quote of, our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate, our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And so how we can capture that and reflect that for others. I'm so inspired this evening. Thank you all for sharing that. We've got a little bit more time, and so I wanted to see if there's a question from the audience. Thank you, Mr. Nathan, for kicking it off for us. I appreciate that. Is there another question that we have from the audience? The Zoom folks can put it in the chat if they would like.
I'm wondering what you would most like to see change in Richmond, right here where we are, and where you see opportunities to work for that change.
And I'm going to restate that just right here for the microphone. So Stephanie asked what change is most needed, what the panelists would most like to see change in Richmond, and how to work for that, where we should put our work towards it. Is that a fair rephrasing?
Yeah.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, I'm gonna begin with the Human Rights Commission, having been on it. The Human Rights Commission was the enforcement agency for the civil rights laws in Richmond. Not only the civil rights laws, but the fair housing laws. So without a Human Rights Commission, we have operated as a city for 10, 11, 12 years without a Human Rights Commission, which means we have not enforced the civil rights laws of the city for 11 years. We have to have that. The removal of enforcement for civil rights laws is as silly as removing enforcement for laws against murder. And those aren't laws just for protecting black people, but they're also for protecting, in general, women. They're for protecting people who are handicapped or disabled in some way. All of those laws are not being enforced right now in the city of Richmond. That's a travesty. And part of it is that the Human Rights Commission has been conceived. It was presented in the newspaper and in a number of places as if it was a sort of human relations commission. It is not that. It is not a commission where we sit down and talk together. We need those kinds of things. But the Human Rights Commission was enforcing the laws. It is illegal for the city to operate without those laws. It is mandated by the city laws that they be enforced. The mayor is supposed to appoint someone within 60 days of a vacancy for the director, and the city and the mayor and the city government is supposed to put people on a Human Rights Commission to enforce that. They have not done that for 11 years. This city does not care about civil rights laws, or they would have done that. The mayor knows that. I've talked to him about that. He has refused to do that. He's putting some kind of thing together right now talking about we're going to see what we need. We know what we need. It's mandated in the law. He knows that. And so we need in this city to start enforcing our laws. We have gone that long without fair housing. The Human Rights Commission is the only commission that the only method of enforcement of fair housing laws in the city. We have gone for 10, 11 years without any enforcement of our fair housing. That's got to stop. And people have to understand that we're not talking about a relations group. We're talking about the enforcement of the laws. But that's happening nationally. As Tom Williams mentioned, that the voting rights law is being cut down. Several of its provisions have been cut out, and such that states now who were needed to deal with it, deal with the voting rights law, they are going around it. They are doing things that's illegal according to it. So what's happening is the same thing that happened in the 1800s. We're going to need a whole new civil rights movement when this is over if we don't stop this thing. And we've got to stop it now. We've got to stop the erosion of the enforcement of the laws which protect our citizens. And we're not just talking about black citizens, we're talking about citizens of every sort who are in some kind of position to be taken advantage of. And we've got to do that. This is not an optional thing. This is what needs to be done. So eventually somebody will sue the city and then they'll listen. But I hate it to have to come to that.
you know, and mentioning the fact that we haven't had a Human Rights Commission. Without that, some of those complaints have been coming to the local chapter of the NAACP, and we're not set up to go in and arbitrate or be the go-between between an ailing set of parents that has an adult disabled person that's being taunted and harassed by the neighbors. You know, I'm thinking, you know, what are we supposed to do? You know, that's something that could have been handled with a Human Rights Commission. And it is time. And I'm not sure what the local leadership is planning to do. I know they're talking about something, but like Bob said, we know what's needed. And we need it yesterday.
I think one thing, Susha, I'll be quick. One thing we definitely need to do, and that's get, again, beyond the labels, get beyond the terms. Let's figure out exactly what's going on. Let's figure out how people are being affected. The stories is what really sheds light for me and makes me, and lets me believe that we need a Human Rights Commission as well, too. I work with families in this community, and you talk about housing, it's atrocious, the housing that we have folks living in. I recall being with an individual, matter of fact, just helping this lady home. She had fallen right out here, to be quite honest. Me and another gentleman were out here conversating in Elstro Park. We saw a lady fall down, so we go to her aid, help her up, figure out where she lived, gave her a ride home. Walked her upstairs, made sure she got there because she was unsteady on her feet. Got up there, figured out the apartment next to her in this home that's carved out into several apartments caught on fire. You could smell, and it's upstairs. As soon as you walked in the door, you could smell you could smell the flame. You could smell that smoke, that burnt wood. And I'm thinking, my gosh, this woman is living right next door to this. Who does she know that she probably shouldn't be in this environment, breathing in still yet these fumes? Who can we go to? Who can we call? I've had trouble. I go to some of these apartments and some of these houses, these rentals that people are living in. One, no floor. How do you live with no floor? How do you have holes in your floor? Who do you call? Who do you go to? And I'm asking the folks that live there, and they're telling me time and time again, I've tried. You have people on fixed incomes that are trying to lay flooring in their home, that are trying to do major plumbing jobs that would cost anybody else hundreds, if not maybe thousands of dollars to do. And they're willing to do it because they have to. Because there's nobody else to go to. There's nobody to turn to ask for help. Had one tell me a story that they actually contacted local code enforcement and came out. Code enforcement told them, well, hey, just so you know, if you're behind on your rent, you probably don't want to make this a thing. You don't want to turn this in because your landlord might evict you because of this, and left. So if that's what we currently have as far as protections, I'm all for the Human Rights Commission if they're coming in to do that work, because we have to treat people better. We have to do better by our citizens. And so legislators, decision makers, whomever, me and you, as we vote and we let our voice be heard, we have to go look at people being affected. We got to quit just driving by, and we got to stop and get out of the cars and look. Some of these houses that you think nobody's living in, there's whole families living in these places and somehow functioning and surviving under these situations that I definitely couldn't do. And so we have to understand the impacts of decisions that are being made around here and take a real look and make our decisions based off the facts, not just rhetoric.
One of the issues that I think is very important for the city of Richmond to really look at is our youth. Our youth and opportunities for people to have access to medical and mental health services. We do not have them here. If you don't have insurance, you can be sick and nobody cares. You will not be treated. So, and education. Youth mental health and medical health and education. Those are the things that we need to really look at. How can we partner with each other instead of, well, you belong to this organization, so I'm not going to talk to you, and we're going to make sure that you're not allowed any type of funding. Let's come together and stop being separatists. We get all those things together, I think we'll have a better community. I know we will have a better community.
You know, I do know that there are agencies that offer community health assessments, Reed being one of them, making sure that that organization has as many people on that email thread as they can get, so that the responses are indicative of the group they serve. You know, I just recently received a health survey from Fort Wayne County, trying to get data on needs of the community of color. So it's got to be a reciprocated type of effect. Information goes out, but we as an underrepresented community needs to respond, because if not, then our voice is not being heard. We see the disparities and know of them, and the pandemic really shined a light on those that don't have health care or have health issues because they haven't had appropriate care. You know, this country's got a lot of work. Things need to be listened to and addressed. Well, on a global scale, we're on the cusp of a war, and you know that's going to take our attention that way. We have a political year coming up that's going to draw us in that direction. You know, we got to be able to sort it out, share what we think, collect the voices, and make sure the final decisions are representative of the voices being heard.
Thank you. Well, I don't know that we can do much better than ending on that note. The collective of voices needs to be heard. Thank you all for coming, panelists.